what we've seen over the last 20 plus years is the steady erosion of faculty as the people really in charge of the university.
They asked me to co-teach the big election 2024 class. And the first day of class was 250 students showed up, and they saw that it was going to be a Democrat and a Republican side by side. The second day of class, 500 students showed up.
I mean, it's really incredible at a school like Columbia, as prestigious as it is, that kids clearly had no idea where the line was and what their rights were.
Good afternoon. I'm John Tomasi. I'm the president of Heterodox Academy. HXA is an international organization of academic insiders who love our universities and want to make them better. As I prefer to think of it, HXA is a group of members, a group of professors who love our universities so much that we're willing to make them better. We love our universities the way Socrates loved Athens, not uncritically, but unrelentingly. And today's panel is going to be on a topic I think of some interest to you all. The title, of course, is Academic Freedom Under Pressure. And we're going to talk about some issues that may wake us up after lunch, perhaps. We're going to talk about the Charlie Kirk tragedy and what that means, what that act of political violence means for campus free expression. We're also going to talk about President Trump and the exogenous shock strategy. We're going to talk about the role of academic insiders in reforming our universities. And we're also going to talk about the future of the university, all in 45 minutes. But we can do that, I'm confident, because we have three really great people who are going to be leading the conversations. First is Jonathan Rauch. Jonathan Rauch is a fellow at the Brookings Institution. He's the author of Kind the Inquisitors. Don't come yet. They're going to applaud when I say a little more about you. He's the author of many books and articles, but also the Kind the Inquisitors, which has one of the best postscripts I've ever read. If you haven't read the Kind the Inquisitors, or if you don't own the edition with the postscript, I highly urge you to buy it. In that postscript, Rauch gives, I think, the most stirring defense I've read of the connection of free speech to progressive political causes, in that case, the cause of gay marriage. It's a startling short essay that I've assigned to many classes of mine at Brown with remarkable effect. You should read it. You should also especially read his book, The Constitution of Knowledge. It is something of a Bible or a holy text around Heterodox Academy, where John is also a board member. John Rauch, please join me. Our next panelist is Mary Kate Carey. Mary Kate was a former speechwriter for George Bush Sr. She's an adjunct professor at the University of Virginia, where she is also the co-chair of the Heterodox Academy campus community. She is the founder of the Think Again Campus Dialogue program, and she is, interestingly, very recently become the Deputy Chief of Staff of Interim President Paul Mahoney, who is also a Heterodox Academy member. We're delighted to have Mary Kate join us. And last but not least is Ricky Schlott. Ricky is a free speech activist. She's a New York Post columnist. She is the co-author with Greg Lukianov of The Canceling of the American Mind. And she is an overall smart and remarkable person who I'm so glad is part of this panel. Ricky. Here we are. Let's just jump right in. So the murder of Charlie Kirk and the act of campus debate shocked the conscience. It also led to faculty cancellations and an intensified sense of threat and polarization on our campuses and beyond. I'm just curious for any one of you, as advocates of academic freedom, what do we make of this event? What's the social meaning of this event? What solutions do you see that might come out of this? And I'll just say also for ground rules, there are very few, but you don't need to answer, each of you don't need to answer every question, but if you want to get in on any one of them or all of them, please feel free. Who wants to take that one?
I'm happy to start. Thanks for having me. So I'm on the ground at UVA, and over the last 5 years of being an adjunct professor, as we started up this Think Again program, which was dedicated to 4 pillars of freedom of speech, viewpoint diversity, intellectual humility, because so many people do not think they can be wrong, and critical thinking, that you don't just believe what someone tells you, you investigate for yourself. And we started having student-facing programming that encouraged civil discourse. And over the last 5 years, the demand has grown and grown and grown. And especially after Charlie Kirk, it has gotten even bigger. Just in the last 2 weeks, we do
noticeably bigger.
Yeah, noticeably bigger. We ran out of food. We ran out of chairs. We had the Turning Point chapter restarted. It's just been remarkable, and I don't think UVA is unique in that. I think the students want to continue, open discourse, civil disagreement. It's very popular right now.
Can I push on that a little bit? So, what I'm hearing you say that there's been a renewed energy around some of these initiatives, including Turning Point. Do you see these are these clearly positive developments?
Oh,
what
yeah.
are you seeing?
Yeah, I think so. And when I first saw it was I got asked, everybody knows, because they can Google me, that I was a Bush speechwriter. And so they asked me to co-teach the big election 2024 class. And the first day of class was 250 students showed up, and they saw that it was going to be a Democrat and a Republican side by side. The second day of class, 500 students showed up. So the student demand is there, and that was a year ago before Charlie Kirk. So I think that I wish there was more impetus for more co-teaching at more colleges, because I think the students are eager to hear both sides.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Ricky or John, do you want to speak to the broader issue about the social meaning of this event? Either of you?
I would say, to me, it made me concerned that the left no longer seems to have at least a recent monopoly on cancel culture. It did seem like the right adopted a lot of the same mechanisms. There were databases that were set up to upload any tweets or posts that people made critical of Kirk after his death. You had the vice president say that people's employers should be contacted about comments. You had a congressman down in Florida brag that he'd already gotten 2 people fired for lesser offenses, and please report anyone that's a public employee who'd made unkind comments. And of course, I have my own opinions about Kirk, but of what happened to him was atrocious, but also why are we using the same mechanisms of cancel culture? And I made a tweet along those lines with a screenshot of that database, and I got comments from people saying, this isn't cancel culture, this is consequence culture. And it's the exact same sort of phrases that one would hear perhaps a couple years ago from the left. And so I was concerned about some of the speech implications as a result of this event, and some of the impulses to use the same kind of cudgel against people for their comments.
And do you, this is a question to you or any of you, if you like, but is there something special and different about the Kirk incident because it's actually a killing? I'm thinking back to when Charles Murray was brutally attacked on the Middlebury campus, shamelessly and shamefully attacked on that campus. And that was an act of violence. I'm just wondering, with the Kirk incident, is there any? I'm sure the word justification is the word I really want, but there seems to be a difference, a disanalogy there. Do you see it that true, or is cancellation culture just bad wherever we see it?
Oh, I think there's absolutely a difference based on what happened, and the event was especially atrocious and tragic based on the context of him engaging in discourse and debate. I think that makes the comments that some people were making truly ghoulish and beyond the pale in some ways. But I think we should be cautious about any sort of infringements on free speech and people's expressions, any sort of databases or government calls to report people to their employers or to report directly to the government itself. I think all of those trends are concerning, and I don't like seeing it on the left. I don't like seeing it on the right. And regardless of the context, I think it should be concerning to anyone who's a champion of free speech.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that cancellation culture is a one flavor being replaced with another, or are there multiple flavors coming from every direction now to mix up the metaphor? Sounds like it might be one replacing the other.
Yeah, I think it's not right on either side. And I think they're now getting a taste of it from both sides. And maybe that will cause people to say, wait a minute, what's going on here? I think the thing that Charlie Kirk was doing was trying to transform colleges back into marketplaces of ideas and places where you debate. And that is what makes this more disturbing, I think, than just a controversial speaker. But I think it makes it a little different.
Yeah, thank you. John, do you want to...
Well, I'll just add a couple of observations. The first is that death as a form of cancellation is hardly new. In fact, it's probably the oldest. You can ask Socrates. You can ask Salman Rushdie, who was threatened with death and lived underground for many years before he finally had an eye stabbed out. So what we saw on campus was part of a very, very long series of trying to silence people using threats and intimidation. Also, it's just interesting to point out that we've heard two accounts, two perspectives on the Kirk killing, and they're two interpretations. They're both true. Well, no, they're not both true. They're quite different. I think one is true, and that's the grassroots interpretation, which is this was a defender of free speech who was assassinated in large part because of his free speech. The other interpretation, which we got from Stephen Miller and the administration, is no, this was an assassination by the left, and we're going to use it as grounds to go after civil society groups on the left relentlessly. You can't run, you can't hide. These are polar opposite uses of this incident, and I have to hope that the former account, the grassroots account, is the one that prevails.
I tell you, this would not be boring. I'll go on to Trump now. So the Trump administration, here we are, life is short. The Trump administration has been making, let's call them aggressive moves, often in the name of civil rights, but also justified in terms of educational excellence, viewpoint diversity, and indeed, free speech. We've seen sticks, such as massive grant program cancellations. We're also seeing some things that may be carrots, though Yasha Monk and I were joking last night that this carrot could be used as a stick. I'm thinking of the compact that was announced yesterday, in which Vanderbilt is an invitee to. My question to you all is, if we want to see a deep and rich kind of curiosity and academic freedom on campus, how should we interpret these government actions? Ricky, you and I were speaking about this before he came on. A lot of the Trump words are words that I say at Heterodox Academy, that we say, words that many of us have said. Do you have any comment on how we should interpret these actions?
Yeah, I think one of the sort of trends, at least in my opinion, of this second Trump administration is he so often identifies problems that I agree with. I think that the fact that we did away with the SAT for so long was an issue, and that's one of the things that he's demanding in this compact is returned, or the fact that viewpoint diversity was basically squelched out on campus is a huge issue. I've dedicated a big portion of my career to that, and he's also addressing that too. However, I can agree with the presupposition and disagree with the mechanism of changing it, and I think particularly wielding federal funding or basically threatening schools if they do not do this in the way that he sees fit is an overstep, in my opinion, even if I agree that the issues are something that matters and should be addressed. I think that a grassroots organic change is the only way that's actually a meaningful and lasting effect. What happens when the next administration has a different set of demands? I think it's interesting that this is a mechanism that's not all that different from the Dear Colleague letter that Obama sent universities. And so, I agree with this. The
letter that addressed how campuses should handle sexual assault accusations.
Yeah, I just don't like a world where the president of the United States can act like the president of a private university, more or less, through this mechanism.
And yet there is this question out there for all of us, was anything going to change without this kind of exogenous shock? John, do you want to speak to any of this?
I was just going to say that although I deplored the Dear Colleague letter, which I thought was an abuse of regulatory authority under President Obama. It was nothing like what we're seeing now, which I think is just flatly illegal. I have yet to see anything that looks like statutory authorization for the government to base access to grants and other funding preferentially based on the views and policies of recipients. That's completely new as far as I know. I think change was happening. You know, we have this idea that nothing was ever going to happen until Chris Rufo came along and made it happen, and that's just not the case. Campuses all over the country were adopting institutional neutrality and the Chicago principles. Administrators across the country were beginning to realize that their campuses were being unduly influenced and chilled by small numbers, comparatively small numbers of activists. We saw the organization of faculty groups at places like top campuses, MIT, Harvard, I believe Stanford, Heterodox Academy, of course, but the Academic Freedom Alliance, I could go on and on. So we were beginning to see, in fact, well underway in seeing some organic responses from within academia, understanding that it had to change. I'm afraid that what we're seeing now may lead to backlash in the other direction.
And that's interesting when we think about inside versus outside reformers. The set of outside reformers is a complex mixture. It's not only government, because some of the outsiders are people like alums and philanthropic foundations that were speaking to these universities in the wake of the attacks, the Hamas attacks, about institutional neutrality and pushing those kinds of ideals. So there's a variety of exogenous shock, people who have exogenous shock potential in their back pocket. It's not just government. Mary Kate, do you want to speak about any of this? I know you're in a somewhat difficult position, a delicate position because you're in a new position, but
Right.
We'd love to have your perspective, anything you want to share.
Yeah, back when I was an adjunct 3 weeks ago, I could speak more freely. But I would say that the sorts of things that we're all talking about, you know, institutional neutrality, you know, the Chicago statement, the things that we're doing to promote free speech and constructive dialogue, higher education should be doing that no matter who the president is. And that we need to keep that momentum going. And I think, as I'm seeing, the students are the ones who are driving this in a lot of ways. The faculty, not as much, but we're getting there. And so I think there's cause for great hope. And I think that the more this gets out in the press, and that these are the sort of things that the administration is talking about and the colleges are talking about, more people should know about it. So good or bad, I think it's helping move the pendulum in the right direction in terms of grassroots and people's understanding of what's going on college campuses.
Yeah, that's very nice. You mentioned faculty, so let's go to that question now. There's a metaphor that I use sometimes in my talks about the university being like a garden for curiosity. And it's a garden in the sense that there are these trees, these tall trees that are like disciplines that are ancient. They grow, they branches die. There's always new growth at the tips all the time. They're constantly growing. It's the wonder of research. They're like, a campus is like a garden in that we have these delicate, important, beautiful flowers brought in every year, students, quadrennials, I suppose, who are there to be tended and nurtured in these special times. And the professors play a role of something like gardeners. They're the long-term residents of the university. As I've come to realize as I've gotten older, presidents come and go, students obviously come and go, but the faculty they're there for a long time. And the question is, what kind of gardeners is this generation of faculty being? Have they fallen asleep in their sheds? Is it possible to wake them up? Will they wake up? And if they do wake up, will they be enraged by the ideological orientation of the ideological origin of these complaints? Or will they arise to the occasion and truly love the universities? That's my question, is something like, what do you think about the role of faculty? Are they conformists? Can they be helpful? What possibilities do you see for inside reform? And anyone can take that.
Okay, I guess I'll do that.
Yeah, I'm looking at you. I'm a journalist. I'm not on a faculty. So.
Okay. So it goes to the question, what do our universities owe our democracy? Which I think should be at the front of all of these decisions. And what's happening, as I see, but I just parachuted in 5 years ago. I don't have a PhD. I'm not a lifelong academic.
It gives you fresh eyes.
It is kind of the case that I I couldn't believe sometimes, but there's certainly ideological conformity where at least 95% of the faculty is in ideological agreement. And I am, as far as I know, the only female conservative teaching undergrads. And
at the University of Virginia.
At the University, I should have said that, yes, at University of Virginia. All of the conservatives that I know who are public about their views are tenured already. They don't say what their views are until they get tenure, and they can all fit at my dining room table because I've had them over. And
of course you would.
Of course I would. So the question becomes, what do we do about this? And short of saying we need to change the tenure system, which I don't think is ever going to happen, the next best thing I would say is to bring in practitioners from outside in all disciplines. That certainly in the humanities. And the University of Virginia is very fortunate to have a wonderful faculty that is longtime tenured people who are very committed to the university. And so as a result, we have very few adjuncts. And I think that could be one thing that a lot of schools do is bring in people. You could have an econ class where you have a Marxist debating a free marketeer. You could have religious studies classes of people of different faiths. It doesn't have to just be politics. I think that would be a wonderful thing in our democracy for the next generation of leaders to hear.
And Mary Kate, you talked about the ideological one-sidedness of the profession. In 1965, the ratio of left-right professors, as self-reported, was about 2 to 1. Now it's something like 18 to 1, but in some disciplines it's close to 100 to 0. So that's been a huge change. I think we all recognize that as being something worrying about that generational change. But I just want to suggest something else and see what you all think. I sometimes think that the most important divide among the faculty is not left-right. It's whether you believe that the university is a place for curiosity, and you believe that whatever your ideology, that you should stand up for those values when you see them being under attack. Is that a naive view, or do you think is that the truly important division within the faculty?
I would say that Heterodox Academy, I'm not just saying this because you're our moderator, the Heterodox Academy is free to join, and you only have to agree to one sentence. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's something like, I support viewpoint diversity, constructive disagreement, and open inquiry in research and higher education. And so 5 years ago, I hear about this, and I say, that's mom and apple pie. Why would I not agree to that? And I join, and I can't tell you the number of faculty who have come up to me and said, that was a red badge of courage there. Can't believe you did that. And I'm like, what? How is that courageous? Courageous to me is landing on the beach at Normandy. And so that agreeing to that sentence, so that tells you what's going on. We have the second largest chapter in the country at UVA, and it's getting bigger, which is good, but it shouldn't be, it should be that every faculty member agrees to that statement.
But maybe not everyone loves mom and apple pie. John?
Well, I was just going to wonder, John, if there isn't an even more skewed ratio among faculties than left-right, even in communications and sociology departments, and that's courage versus gutlessness.
You're going to go there.
Well, it's understandable that a junior faculty member would lie low. Something I've never understood, and I've asked many people, including on this campus last year, I've asked many professors, what we've seen over the last 20 plus years is the steady erosion of faculty as the people really in charge of the university. They've been usurped by the general counsel's office, multiple levels of deans, the student life office, and so on. So it's not uncommon now to hear, I have stories of distinguished tenured professors called to justify their classroom practices for 4 hours before some mid-level HR bureaucrat because some student complained. And I'm like, why has this happened? Why have faculty allowed so much to go on in universities around them? Some of them, yes, it's true, are social activists, and they think they're there to sell some kind of political agenda. Most are not. Most are just lying low and they ought to be speaking up.
Do you want to speak to this? If you
I
like.
mean, I don't have the faculty experience, certainly, that you do, but I would agree that the line is not right and left, and it's decreasingly right and left. I think since October 7th, there have been all different sorts of incursions on free speech on both sides of that issue, which is not a clean right-left issue. I think the Trump administration's incursions on free speech of all varieties has made it less of a partisan issue. And so I do think that I personally hold out hope that defenders of free speech can come from a much larger variety of political persuasions and be unified by threats of all different sorts and from all different directions, which wasn't so obvious to me a couple of years ago. And while having the whiplash of free expression being attacked from all different sides is kind of an unpleasant thing, I do think that it also can be a unifying thing for people who are truly dedicated to the principles and not just their own side having the right to speak. I've been very disappointed by how many people, in my view, on the right, now that they have more cultural ascendancy, are not as interested in defending actual free speech principles as they would have been just a couple of years ago.
Yes, it's fascinating. We've been watching that with great interest, and sometimes I think human, all too human. That's just who we are. I'll add one piece to this, if I may, that I've observed. What I see as president of Heterodox Academy is that in the early years of HXA, being a member of HXA was in some sense a badge of courage, as you were mentioning, Mary Kate. And that was in part because professors often felt that their administrators or presidents, people who control their salaries and their careers, were not on their side, or not on the side of, or only ambivalently on the side of open inquiry. They would say they were, but when Monday came, as Chancellor Diermeier mentioned this morning, they would do the thing they needed to do too often rather than support those principles. And what we've seen at HXA over the past 2 years, and especially over the past year, is that college presidents are now coming out in favor of open inquiry. And to be an HXA member now is less a badge of courage, and they're less being put into the contra position. They now have the chance to be principled allies. And that's bringing a lot more members into our group, and they're more vocal as well. So just something I want to share with you all and with the audience too, that there's so many different things happening, but one of the things that's happening at this moment is that the culture within faculty seems to be changing because of the change in attitude and the words of campus presidents.
I'll just give you a slogan that I live by, and this is what I say to professors who don't really understand and can't explain why they've ceded so much of their academic freedom to bureaucrats, which is that if professional academics don't defend academic freedom, no one else will.
That's a good point. And I'll add to it, if I may. If you think of professors as gardeners, we're selected because we do this nerdy thing, some field that we love, Egyptology or philosophy in my case, or cell biology or whatever it might be. They're not selected because they care for the university and they've shown any particular knowledge or interest in that broader concept. They're just really good at some really nerdy little thing that we happen to love and be good at. So the question is, how do you make them see that they're citizens? How do you make them recognize that if they don't stand up and make things happen, then the garden may go to pot? And I think if professors don't see that now, they never will. But I'm hopeful that they might. Let's talk about the future, shall we? It may be more optimistic we go forward. So many universities are under economic pressure, great economic pressure they were under before this administration's movements. But they're also under pressure because of declining enrollments, and especially perhaps the unpredictable disruptions involved with AI. I had dinner last night with a group of professors here at Vanderbilt, and we were talking a lot about the AI disruption that they see in their classes. I'm just wondering if you'd like to speak to this. How do these pressures affect academic freedom? Any of those pressures you like to choose? Are there buyers for an academically free campus? or we simply see different safe spaces for different segments of the market? So that's a broad question. What do you see as the future of the university? Will AI disrupt everything? What other changes do you see demographically, economically? How will they respond?
Well, one thing that I do want to address is I don't think that all the economic pressure is necessarily unhealthy, particularly on the enrollment front. I think that's a long-term trend and in some ways is a healthy market correction, especially coming out of COVID. A lot of young people, particularly young men, I think were looking around and listening to the debate about student loan forgiveness and questioning the value of degrees in some contexts, or just questioning the assumption that a degree is the only pathway to success in society, which I think did have a hold on our culture for a very long time, and are carving out different pathways to success. I do think that we had a serious problem in that a third of colleges were graduating classes where the average graduate was making less than the average high school graduate. I mean, we have to have a serious conversation about what the purpose is of a degree in a university and what you're coming out the other end on and what your goals are. And I think that part of that enrollment economic pressure is healthy, and young people being a little bit skeptical and asking themselves those tough questions about what college means to them and what that ultimate pathway is for them is actually a positive thing. And so I'm kind of on the side of there is more than one way to get to your definition of success. And so it is healthy to have some market pressure coming from young people, in my view.
Would it be inappropriate for me to ask you to share your path?
Yes, and it's not inappropriate. I'm more than happy to. I was at NYU as an undergraduate during the pandemic, and they went fully remote on Zoom, raised tuition during Zoom school. And so I took a leave of absence and started writing, and ultimately just kept writing and have not finished my degree personally. I'm very happy doing what I'm doing, but I'm also very personally aware of the fact that there is still a lot of stigma in our society if you don't have a degree, even if you love what you do and are happy doing it. And so I think we need to be a little bit more open-minded to different paths.
Yeah, more power to best-selling authors without undergraduate degrees. Any other thoughts on this? This is a very broad topic, I know, but pick any piece you like.
The piece I liked was, is there a market for academically free universities? And I would say, if you build it, they will come. And we saw that with UATX in Texas. University of Austin just opened its doors and is all about this sort of thing, raised $100 million before they had a single alumni and a single alumnus. And but you see places like Vanderbilt. Chancellor Diermeijer's remarks this morning about everything they're doing here. Vanderbilt is thriving, and I would say as a result of that, UVA is thriving because the interim president is saying this is going to be one of his top priorities is free speech, viewpoint diversity, all the things we're trying to do. So we've built a national organization called Campus Discourse Project. If there's anybody here that wants to talk to me afterwards, it's trying to send these student-facing programming ideas to schools across the nation and try and build more of this, because I think higher education needs this. The other real quick thing I'm seeing is the number of high school grads who are arriving at college, at least in the state of Virginia, from high schools that did not allow cell phones in their classrooms, is changing the dynamic in the classrooms at UVA. And we are seeing many, many classes go no tech. And the teachers, the professors like it because they're afraid they're getting videoed and they're going to get doxxed. And so the students want it because that's what they've learned, and the professors want it. I think it's the beginning of a whole new world in higher education where the technology is replaced with face-to-face interaction, which would be great.
And what's striking to me about that is that in the work that we do at HXA, we're always so concerned that students arrive on campus having learned cancel culture mentalities in high school, let's say. And what you're describing is a kind of learning that goes on in high school, possibly, that they bring to campus, certain habits of heart and mind that are more positive because they're not so connected to the phones, perhaps.
That makes free speech orientation such an opportunity.
So what do you mean by that?
That I think having, like he was saying this morning about Vanderbilt, that from the minute you get here, they start talking about what it's like to be constructively engaged and arguing with evidence and in town hall style debates. I don't think they're getting that K through 12. And if you can start that in college, hallelujah.
So you're saying, though, let me stick with it a bit more about what you saw at you're seeing at UVA. You're seeing that students now are arriving, having been in high school for what, 1 or 2 years without the cell phones?
It's just started their second semester of senior year this year. So just now, they only had 6 months of no cell phones. Next year, academic year, we'll have 2 classes of, first and second year students will have come from 70% at UVA is in-state. And so the Virginia public schools cannot have cell phones. That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people, right? And it's just remarkable. As now social change happens, that's just one semester or one term of a high school class, and you already see a difference.
And we're already seeing it. Yeah.
It's fascinating. And I have to mention that John Haidt, my dear friend, and he's the co-founder of Heterodox Academy, is one of the people who's really been pushing for this idea that cell phones don't make us better or happier or perhaps more free, but that's another conversation. We had some of it this morning, obviously. John, do you want to get on this question? So I'm asking you a question about the future of the university. Anything you want to add to that at all?
I don't think so. It's so broad, I'm not quite sure what aspect to address.
I'll give you one. Why not, if you want? So some people have said that the arrival of AI is going to be as destructive to the credentialing function of the university that the invention of the Gutenberg press was to the monasteries in England. Before the Gutenberg press, an essential function of the monasteries was to reproduce texts, holy texts that could otherwise not be reproduced. But when the press arrived, that essential function was taken away. And some people have written, several people now have written, and I've given a talk about this, that maybe something similar is happening with universities regarding our credentialing function because of AI. If students can take your essay question you've carefully written for them about, in my case for philosophy, how do we know the external world exists, or some classic perennial problem, they can plug that into AI and get a quicker answer than they could, scratch their nose perhaps. And if that's the case, and if research, a professor from Vanderbilt was telling me last night that he thinks that in his field, Germanic intellectual history, again, like I said, weird stuff we do. In his field, he thinks now that AI research is good or better than a lot of the research that he and his colleagues do. So, on that analogy again, is AI going to displace the credentialing function of universities because students can just plug anything into their computers? Will it also replace the gardening function of those great trees? We'll have computers tending to the trees now, robots going up to the branches, adding the new leaves. That's a big analogy with lots of different pieces in it. Maybe you don't want to bite on it, but any thoughts about that analogy?
I have a single answer to all questions about artificial intelligence, which is we'll see. In terms of the future of academic freedom per se, I am hopeful. I wouldn't say I'm outright optimistic or pessimistic, but I think we're starting to see more innovation than we used to see in the past. I'm very bullish. After initial skepticism, I'm very bullish on the schools of civic thought that we're seeing in state universities. My initial concern about that was this is a direct imposition on academic freedom. You had the legislature in Arizona say, we're planning a school on your campus. They could have said, we're mandating a department of creationism to teach this as an alternative to biology, which would be a gross intrusion on academic freedom. But instead it worked. It's worked at ASU. It's now working at more than a dozen other campuses. It's an interesting hybrid model. We saw the rise of University of Austin, on whose advisory board I served until August when I rotated off. I was on campus in May. They are doing a remarkable job for a startup university. The experience that they're giving their students and the environment of robust disagreement, which the faculty spoke of, were really kind of inspiring. And I think some of the changes we're talking about, AI among them, but also, as Ricky says, the changing demands of students, the changing demand of the job market, the fact that an Ivy League education just won't be as important as it was when I was a kid, these are going to drive more innovation, I suspect, or at least I hope.
Do you want to speak to that as well?
I second you on civic education and how that could be the next phase in higher education as we talk about the future. And since this is a free speech-oriented audience, what I'm also seeing is not only is there a lack of knowledge of the great speeches and things like that, because the K through 12 civics education has disappeared, there's lack of knowledge about the First Amendment and what it covers. And so my shameless plug is I have these with me if anybody wants them for their schools. And these are, Freedom Forum has them out in the hall. They did a version of the First Amendment for all schools. We did them at UVA, and then we also got students at UVA to write them. So it was not written by the lawyers. It's in understandable English. Sorry to all the lawyers in the audience. And then we had fire and University Council make sure it was all correct. But that's the kind of thing we're making available nationwide, because First Amendment applies to every public university in the country, and they'll have their own time, place, and manner restrictions. But let's get this to the students so the students understand there's a huge misconception that hate speech is something you can get arrested for. And that's not true. So things like that, we've got to let them know what the rules are and what you do in a protest and all that.
Your pamphlet reminds me of the pocket constitution that people are passing out.
It's very similar.
Ricky, do you want to get involved in this too?
Yeah, I was just going to say, there is also just something so crazy, though, that we're talking about civics in higher education. Like the fact that, I mean, a lot of people don't go to college, and this should just be something that we're doing in K to 12. And I'm from my own personal experience, I never had a civics class in my entire life. And I also arrived on campus like having to educate myself about the First Amendment and read John Stuart Mill in my own time.
This is public schools?
I went to private schools, and we really just skipped all of that.
Zero civics?
I had never had a single civics class in my entire life.
I hope she was going to say she dropped out of high school too.
No, I did finish that part. But I mean, it's really astonishing that that's the job of a college educator at this point. I mean, I think it goes to show how much we desperately need an orientation on free speech when kids get to campus. And that, I think, is part of why after October 7th, things devolved as dramatically as they did, because I think having been covering the Columbia protests as a reporter on campus, those kids did not understand the time, place, and manner lines and genuinely believed that their encampment was just as much a demonstration of their free expression as protesting in front of an administration building. And those lines were not clear or delineated for them. And so they were indignant and furious when consequences came for them. And had that line been made more clear for them, I think they could have gotten their points across far more effectively, and the administration would have been able to handle it in a much less bombastic way. I mean, it's really incredible at a school like Columbia, as prestigious as it is, that kids clearly had no idea where the line was and what their rights were, which also was a huge disservice to them too.
I visited encampments at Columbia and at NYU. I live in New York while they were going on, and I was amazed talking with the students what their views were on this, because they had not had serious conversations in their lives about what time, place, manner restrictions might be. So they didn't know the basic rules like that. But more than that, I think, what I noticed from talking to students is that they hadn't really struggled with the true difficulty about free speech. Because even when you know the rules of free speech, even when you know all the clauses and all the exceptions and why they're justified, there's still something very personal and very sort of gut level about free speech commitments, because it is truly the eternally radical idea. There's something about speech that we feel has power to move people, that worries us. And no matter how well we know all the rules and all the clauses, unless you've actually encountered a moment of ambiguity, a moment of serious self-doubt about free speech, you don't really know what free speech is about. And I think our students really haven't had that. I just want to thank you all for being part of this panel, for your thoughts, for your candor. Please join me in thanking the panelists.